All right, so in the PowerPoint slides, I'm always going to have these links to the textbook, so that's just will be an easy, convenient thing for you. All right, so what again, thinking about these learning outcomes, we want to be able to describe the properties of life. So what are the things that separate living things from non-living things? And then we want to be able to describe the levels of organization among living things. Okay, and I threw in this Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive development. We often use this in education to talk about kind of these lower level thinking skills of remembering and understanding, and then these higher level thinking of applying, evaluating, and creating. So because this is the first chapter, right, we're laying the foundation. We want to be able to remember and understand concepts so that later in the semester we can apply, analyze, evaluate, and then maybe if you decide to continue on with this, maybe you'll even create new information. Okay. So what are the criteria that separate a living thing from a non-living thing? So see if you can come up with a couple items. Now, there's a whole list. Well, in order to be alive, bless you, my son, you are a living thing. You need to have order, right? There needs to be structure. So the image that I have in the background here is all the organelles of a cell. Okay. In order for there to be life, there needs to be structure, there needs to be function. Each of these organelles does its own special job. We're going to spend a whole chapter talking about that kind of stuff, right? It's not just a bunch of nonsense. And even above the cellular level, right, at the organism level and at the right, the individual level, there's organization, right? That we have an organ system. I have skin and eyes and hair and a heart and lungs and blah, blah, blah. Talking about an order, and that goes from the atomic level all the way up into the really big level, and we're going to see that in a few slides. Okay. Another thing that we need to be able to, another box to check for being a living thing is being able to respond to stimuli. Okay, so we're used to thinking about mama bears protecting their cubs, right? We're used to thinking about the bright lights, after you've been in a dark room and somebody turns on the light, oh, it hurts your eyes, right? And so this behavior of closing your eyes and shielding your eyes is a response to that stimulus. Okay, plants also do this too. So here in the background photo, I have Venus flytraps. So if you've ever seen how these work, there's these little trigger hairs. There's three of them. Two hairs need to be triggered in quick succession, or one needs to be triggered twice. So, and that's what the external stimulus that causes those Venus flytrap mouths to close and trap that insect so they can be digested. Okay. We also need to have reproduction. So that can be in the form of, right, how are we going to make more individuals? This can be in the form of sexual reproduction, like we see in the background photo here, where we have an egg, this big, large cell surrounded by all of these little tiny sperm cells, right? And that once that sperm and the egg fuse, then we can have the development of another individual and have sexual reproduction that way. We're also going to talk about a lot about asexual reproduction, so how we can clone organisms. This is often done with plants and fungi, but not so much animals, but still some animals. But we also are going to spend a lot of time thinking about how do our cells reproduce. So when my skin cells, after 2 weeks, they stop functioning and they need to be shed. And how do those cells underneath produce more cells? So we're going to have a whole chapter talking about that. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about adaptation and evolution. So over the course of multiple generations, are we going to see changes in how these traits are passed on? The different traits are going to be more adapted or better suited for a given environment. Once we have reproduction, right, that new offspring is going to need to grow and develop. And again, this is going to be a lot of time talking about how do cells reproduce. and that how do we get more cells so that we can have that growth. Homeostasis is the ability of an organism or of a cell to maintain an internal environment that's different from the external environment. So this is the day that my youngest daughter got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So if you don't have type 1 diabetes, when you eat, the food that you eat releases sugar, right? Glucose, and your cells are going to sense that higher blood sugar. They're going to produce a protein called insulin that's going to take the sugar molecules from your blood and bring it into your cells. Okay, and that causes your blood sugar to drop. Once it drops to a certain level, the signal that you're hungry, you need to eat, right? And so then you eat and your blood sugar increases and your body releases insulin, your blood sugar drops. And so we're going to have these mechanisms to maintain our blood sugar within a given value, right? A pretty narrow value. So most people without type 1 diabetes have a blood sugar that ranges from 80 to about 120 grams per deciliter of blood. Okay. So for my youngest kid here, um, she uh, she has an autoimmune disease where her immune system attacks the cells that produce the insulin, and so she's not producing insulin. So when she eats, there's no signal to say, oh, I got to make insulin. And so her blood sugar increases and increases and increases and increases because her body can't maintain homeostasis. So without the modern medicine and our modern mechanism of producing insulin using biotechnology techniques that we're going to talk about in this semester, she would not be able to survive. The last criterion for being a living thing is that there needs to be energy processing. So in this class, we're going to talk about a lot about enzymes and metabolism and how we're going to take energy from our food and turn it into chemical energy that our cells can use to build structures, to respond to stimuli, to know when to reproduce, to provide homeostasis so that we're keeping the right amount of concentration of various molecules inside the cells versus outside the cells. We're also going to spend a chapter talking about photosynthesis. So how does the energy that we use as things that need to eat other things, how does that come through the plants? How do the plants capture the light energy from the sun? And then how do we use it in our bodies? So there's a lot of that coming up. So these are our criteria for being alive: order, response to stimuli, reproduction, adaptation and evolution, growth and development, homeostasis, and energy processing.